The unexpected gift of survival. Emma White's story of finding meaning after suicide. What happens after you survive the unthinkable? Emma White shares her remarkable journey of healing and personal growth after a suicide attempt. Explore the unexpected gifts of resilience, self discovery, and compassion that can emerge from darkness. Learn how to break the silence surrounding suicide and foster a more supportive and understanding environment for all. Welcome to the Wellness Driven Life Show, where you're about to go on a wellness driven ride. Welcome, and let me share a little bit about the guest that we have here today. Emma White is the author of the book, It's Not Okay, But It Will Be, and is the founder and president of Life is Worth It organization. She is passionate about youth suicide prevention and shares her story of surviving suicide as a teenager to help others see that their life is worth living too. I am so pleased to help welcome to our stage Miss Emma White. Welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm excited to have you here too, Emma. It is going to be a great conversation about a very pertinent conversation. And so let's get started by sharing with the audience a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so I wear a lot of hats in the suicide prevention and mental health space, and I love every single one of them. So I'm very blessed to do what I do. First and foremost, I am a suicide survivor. I survived suicide when I was 15 years old as a teenager, and very thankful to be here. And that put me on a path, a journey that I didn't ever really think I was going to be on, but it propelled me into a world of helping people and community focused and suicide prevention. So I am the founder and president of the Life is Worth It organization, which is a nonprofit that focuses on youth suicide prevention through upstream education on our health, which is amazing. And I love it. And it was founded in 2020. So we survived the pandemic, and now we're just rolling with programs and workshops and curriculum to help youth understand every dimension of their health and why they're important for their overall wellness. I am an author, as you mentioned. I have a podcast, and then in my day job, 8 to 5 job, I work for the state of Nevada as the statewide youth suicide prevention coordinator. So as you can tell, there's a lot going on, but I love every single role that I have.
That's incredible. There is a lot going on. And your jobs, everything that you do is really in alignment with your passion. And that is incredible. Not everybody gets to say that and do that and see that. And so because you're doing all of those things that's completely in alignment with that passion, that's an incredible life. I mean, how does that feel for you? Are you enjoying it thoroughly? Do you feel like every single day is a blessing? Do you want to get out of bed because of that?
Absolutely. And of course, there's hard times. It's hard to deal with things that are stressful for people, or people in pain having thoughts of suicide. That can be really challenging, but it does drive that purpose for me. And I feel lucky that I get to wake up every single day and help other people navigate those challenges, because I know that so many people might not have that opportunity. So I'm really thankful that I get to do that. And making sure that I am prioritizing myself and my needs as well is really important in this work. In any healthcare or community work, it's important that we take care of ourselves just as much as we take care of other people. But I love what I do, and again, I just feel so blessed and thankful to do it.
Yeah, Emma, I mentioned that because, there's so much study and research talking about driven purpose, this drive to want to do something, and how that has such a massive impact of, wanting to get out of bed, being excited about the day ahead because you're really fulfilling something that you feel is that meaningful. And also going into that servitude aspect we want to serve. And when we serve, it really is this fulfilling piece of overall well being. So let's talk a little bit about how you got started in all of this. So let's backtrack just a bit. How did you end up having this emotional turmoil in the first place? And when was the point when you really started noticing that that was what was happening where you wanted to start switching it?
So my story really begins, I would say, at 15 years old when I was in high school. I was a sophomore in high school and I made the varsity basketball and volleyball teams as the youngest person on both teams, which came with a lot of pressure, as you can imagine. In high school, teenagers, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves when we're young to be perfect or to be popular, to be liked by everybody. I certainly wasn't any different. Then I made the sports teams, and unfortunately it brought along some jealousy from other teammates, older teammates who didn't make the team or maybe had been on the team before. And unfortunately they started bullying me in various forms, whether it was at school or online on social media or harassing me through text message. And this was in 2010, which is just so crazy to think that it was 14 years ago. Sometimes it feels like it was yesterday, and other times I feel like it's a whole lifetime ago. But we didn't talk about mental health the way that we do now. And I'm really proud of our society that, especially after the pandemic, we've seen a change in people wanting to talk about these things and recognizing how important it is to talk about our mental health. But in 2010, it wasn't something that people felt comfortable about, or, talking about. And even in school, we didn't learn about it as part of a health curriculum. So when I started getting bullied, I felt very alone and thought that I was the only person experiencing that, which I know now isn't the case, but it felt that way when I was in high school. And so that put me in a place where I didn't feel like I could talk to anybody and had to shove all of my emotions deep down, which many of us do as a protective thing. We think, well, if I don't show my emotions, then I'll just get over it and I'll be okay. But what happens when we do that is a lot of times we might make it worse because emotions need to be let out. All of us experience emotions and we have to be able to talk about them in a safe way. So that led me to experiencing anxiety and then ultimately depression, which in 2010, I didn't know that's what I was experiencing because, as I said, we didn't talk about those things. So when I had my first panic attack, I thought I was having a heart attack because the symptoms were so similar. And that's really scary to be dealing with as a 15-year-old. And then just not being able to share my emotions in a healthy way led me to depression that I experienced for about 4 months. And the thing is with suicide is about pain and it's about wanting to end pain. And so when you get into that where you feel like there's no way out, that the only way to end that pain is to end your life, that's where we get those suicide ideations and actions. And that's where I was at. I didn't think that the world, I was constantly being told by my peers that the world would be better off without me, that nobody cared. So, you start to believe those things after a little bit of time. And thankfully, my suicide attempt was interrupted by my mom. And I'm very thankful that she had a motherly intuition to check on me. And, I don't know if I'd be here today without her doing that. So I'm very thankful for that intervention and interruption. And then it set me on a path that I never thought that I'd be on. But again, just so thankful to be here. And it took me a long time. It took me about 10 years to figure out, hey, you could do something and help other people from your story.
Wow, that's very powerful. And as a mother of 3 daughters, that touches home, thinking about, just entering to see your child self-harm. And so, I'm curious about that. Did mom say something to you that really sparked wanting to think differently and do something about it? I know you said that it took a lot longer to really come into the forefront of really making a change, not just for yourself, but for many, many people across the board. But was there something that your family or your mom helped ignite more of a burning flame within you?
Well, I think the first part is that they encouraged me, and maybe encourage isn't the right word, but kind of forced me to heal in that sense because I was a teenager, and so they took matters into their own hands and got me into counseling and therapy, which I really believe saved my life. So I'm very thankful for that. And then after I got out of high school and went through college, it wasn't until I got my first job out of college, which was working for a hospital in social services, and it wasn't a job that I really knew much about, but I needed a job after college, so I just applied and got it. And then working with the community and working in the hospital system, I learned my love for helping people. And my family and my parents, of course, they encouraged me to continue on that path, and went back and got a second college degree in psychology because I was so passionate about it. And so, of course, they've always been supportive of me, but it can be challenging to open those wounds a little bit and to talk about those things publicly. So I needed to be ready to get to that place, and it took me about 10 years to get there. But everything that I've done, they've been on board with, and they just constantly encourage me to keep doing it and keep fighting and helping people the best that I can.
So it sounds like support is a very needed thing and aspect to all of this. And Emma, I really appreciate you sharing that it took you about 10 years to get there. The reason that is so important is because it can take that long. And so when we start sharing our stories and when we start stepping into that vulnerability, it's not going to change overnight. It's not going to be easy overnight. And the first few times you do it, because it's so packed full of motion, you're not going to necessarily receive the best feedback. And yet there's this vital importance to sharing our story, to letting it out, to expressing our emotions. It's interesting, the process. So what do you have to say about that? What was your experience like when you started sharing your story in spurts? What was that experience like in the feedback you were getting from the audience?
My first, I guess, public speaking engagement around this was in 2019 after a family that my family knows lost their son to suicide. And they wanted to host an event to raise money for the crisis line. And I had never spoken publicly before about it, but they knew that I had this experience. And so they asked me if I would be interested in talking about it. They didn't know that I was writing my book at that time, so it kind of went hand in hand together. But I was still trying to figure out, like, what's the language that I want to use? How do I want to talk about this? And I'll be honest with you, when I first started sharing my story, of course, I had people that were very supportive and wanted to help me along in that journey. But there were also a lot of people that didn't understand and said things like, well, how could you have gone through that when you were a varsity athlete, or when you seem so confident now, right? Like, some of these things that we say because we just don't know what to say in the face of challenges or adversity. So when I first started sharing, I did get a lot of that, or you don't look like you would survive suicide, which is hurtful to somebody who has experienced that, and then it takes so long to talk about it. But I give them grace because I know that it's not the easiest thing to respond to. So the more and more that I've talked about it, the more supportive people have gotten. And again, after the pandemic, I think we're just hearing people's stories, whether it's athletes or people in the media or just our local friends and neighbors. We're hearing these stories more and more. So I think it's becoming less taboo of a subject, and people are to understand, hey, this does impact a lot of people, and probably people that I wouldn't even think of, right? So I give them grace, and I'm not mad about it, because I know that everybody didn't grow up in a culture or a world where this was openly talked about.
And yes, I agree with you that right now it is an incredible time in history, because not only is information uh, available to us and spread very, very quickly, that we get to share our stories, that we get to bring this to the forefront of people's minds and hearts. But also it is something that's being talked about more and more and more. It's being brought up. My high school era was during the Columbine shooting time in Colorado. And so that was a really big impact, a really big awareness of bullying, et cetera. And so it also sparked a little bit of why I wanted to go into, such as you want to serve, you want to help, you want to give back, you want to stop this that is so largely unfortunately, a suicide or school shootings, etc., where the human body, mind, soul can only go so far, where then we feel like there's no other options but to lash out or harm ourselves or harm others. But it invited me to want to go into law enforcement and give back that way, where this has invited you to be a spokesperson to aid in people who are having self-harmful thoughts, or if there's somebody that has seen others have self-harming thoughts. So it really is a great time in history that we do get to talk more and more about it, to share our stories. And when we talk about sharing our stories, it isn't easy, like we mentioned. And thank you so much for sharing that, people had ideas and thoughts of you like, well, you don't look like a suicide survivor. So there's so many different, people who have ideas of what it should look like, what it shouldn't look like. And yet it could look like anything.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we're understanding that more and more now, that there's not one face or one look to suicide or even mental health challenges or any challenges. All of us experience some sort of struggle in our life. So we have to get to that place where we understand that there isn't a face to whatever it is that we're thinking about. There's just not. All of us experience those things no matter who we are, where we come from, what we look like. They might look a little bit different. Our journeys are going to look different, but we all struggle at some point. So, I think we're getting better, but we still have work to do.
We have a lot of work to do. And so I'm curious about some of the stories and feedback that you have encountered, Emma, because I think that is one of the coolest things that happens when we start to share ourselves, when we open up about our experiences. We start to see that more and more people have experienced something similar. So we'll move into our first commercial. And when we get back, let's share a little bit about that. Stay tuned. Are you ready to take control of your ride to wellness? Rev up with Driven Living. Visit www.drivenliving.com and buckle up for a journey. Get exclusive access to our Wellness Driven Life Show guest portal, where you can dive deep into the minds of our esteemed guests. Sign up for our newsletter and get insider scoops on these distinguished personalities. It's like having a backstage pass to their life-changing wisdom. But that's not all. You'll also receive a free hug. You heard me right, a free hug. An enlightening ebook from the Driven Living team. Discover the science-backed benefits of hugging yourself. It's a fill-up for your wellness tank. Because at Driven Living, we believe in fueling your journey to wellness, both physically and psychologically. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.drivenliving.com today. Welcome back, everyone. We're here with Emma White. And so we're talking about suicide and the repercussions and all of the things and the stigma between all of that. And so what I would love to know is, as we talk about sharing our stories about our suicidal thoughts, all of these things, we start to see and hear other people come up and say, me too. And that's one of the most powerful things about sharing our experiences with each other, because we're all on this life together, right? And we all have similar experiences, but in different ways, because there's infinite possibilities, right? And so we all do have that individual piece. But Emma, I would love to hear from you. What are some of the things, some of the most impactful things that came to you, the people that came to you and said, me too?
We could probably just talk about, have a whole episode about the amount of people that have either sent me a message on social media or have come up to me during a training or after a speaking engagement. And I always feel so grateful and thankful that they have the courage to come up and say that to me. And I think that's one of the most special things about what I do, whether it's, working in the school districts or out at a community event. I never leave without somebody saying me too, like you just said. And I think it's because when you hear somebody talk about their experience, you feel heard and seen. And this is a very specific experience that isn't talked about all the time. And when you give someone an opportunity to share what they've been through, whether it's through their own personal experiences or someone that they've lost or someone that's struggled that they've supported, it gives them power, and it does empower them to be able to share their story in a safe way. So I would say that, there's so many stories I could give, but one of my favorite stories is from a teenager that I met who lives in another country, actually. And I met this teen through social media who was having thoughts of suicide, who had found my page and said, "Oh my gosh, I've never seen anybody talk about this before. And this is what I've been struggling with," and been able to work with this student and get them resources, which can look very different in another country. So I've been able to learn in that process as well. And this has been a 4-year process. And I just got a message the other day from this student who said, "I'm graduating high school and I never thought that I would be here. And thank you so much for helping me get through this." And, it just gives you chills because you never know what could have happened to that person. So there's so many amazing stories that I could share, but that one is one of my favorites.
I love that story. And you're right, because it branches out into, like you said, I'm learning something about different areas globally. This isn't because it impacts us globally because we all are spread across the globe. And the fact that you have given resources and planted seeds in other areas of the globe is really incredible. And that feels so good. And something that you mentioned about, the Me Too feeling, when we feel like we're not alone, it's amazing how quick that can flip a switch where we feel hopeless and we feel like there's no other way to go. But when we hear something that somebody else has gone through that has inspired us, the flip is switched and we're like, okay, I can do this. If you can do this, I can do this too. And it is that self-empowerment piece.
Absolutely. And I feel so fortunate to have mentors in my life at this point who have done the same thing for me that I hope to do for others. So it's really important that we have people speaking out about those challenges, because you never know who is going to hear a specific message from a specific person on a specific day. And that really could change that person's life, and it could save their life.
So Emma, I'm going to flip the script now, because we're talking about how people have these really lower frequency thoughts, and we can impact them by sharing our stories. But let's turn it around a little bit by impacting people who feel like they can't relate. So when we start sharing our stories and they're like, "Well, you don't look like somebody," or "I would never." So I have a story that was a I would never. It was my first suicide case when I was in law enforcement. And it was a mother who had taken her kids to the school bus, dropped them off, given them their last kisses and hugs that they would ever have from her. And then she turned around and committed suicide. And so when I came upon the scene, as I'm passing the beautiful photos through the hall of family vacations, etc., and I could relate as a parent of what that was like. And then I felt like it was such a selfish act. And so there's where I said, I would never. And you vow that you would never stoop, go so deep into a depression. But, there are times in life where you start to say never, because life is full of ups and downs, and you do and can go very deep into a depression. And so, what would you say? Have you had impacts like that where you have seen the other side of it, where you have seen people that say, "I would never," and it kind of turns around on them?
I have heard that, and I think that that's one of the misconceptions and stigmas that exist surrounding suicide and mental health challenges in general, is maybe that person hasn't experienced it, or they think, "I would never do that." And I've, of course, heard that. I've had people say that to me too. The important thing that we have to remember is that everybody experiences pain differently. And how I interpret a situation is going to be different than how somebody else interprets the situation. And I have heard, as you mentioned, people say, "How could they do that to their kids? They were so selfish." And that's a really big misconception, because when you're in that moment of thinking about taking your life, you can't see outside of that. And so what I like to talk about is, it's kind of like being in a tunnel. a very dark tunnel where you might know that there are people outside of that tunnel that love and care about you, but the pain is so deep in that tunnel that you can't see outside of it. And many people who are struggling, they actually feel like they are a burden to their family because they're struggling, and they think that the world would be better off without them. And so that's how we flip that conversation. And when I've had that conversation with people, especially from my own lived experience, then they start to recognize, oh my gosh, what I've thought my whole life, or what I've been told, or what I've heard about these things, is actually completely the opposite of it, because that person was in so much pain that they thought that the only way out of that pain would be to end their life. And many times they think they're actually doing something good for their friends and family. So we're able to change that conversation.
I think that that is a very prominent thought with a lot of people, where they think that the world is better off, right, without them. And so that's a very big consistent thought, I would imagine, for many, many people. So Emma, we talked a little bit the last time we spoke, and I wanted to share a little bit about the spiritual aspect of all of this. So if we think about ourselves as being energetic spiritual beings, we have the physical side of us, of course, and the intellectual piece. But let's talk a little bit about how spirituality comes into play with the services and this topic.
Absolutely. And, I think when we hear spirituality, sometimes we think, oh, is it religious or is it faith-based? And certainly there can be an aspect of that when it comes to spirituality. But the way that I like to look at it is knowing who I am. What is my sense of purpose, my sense of self? How do I love myself? And being in tune with not only myself, but my surroundings and nature. And that's a really crucial part of life, because we do need to be grounded, and we need to know who we are and be able to love ourselves through all of those challenges. And it can be hard. I have been there. I have had times in my life where, I look in the mirror and I don't know who I am, or I don't recognize the person staring back at me. And that's something that we have to choose every single day, to wake up and to love ourselves despite whatever's going on. I think that's a really crucial part of that spirituality piece, and being able to stand up for what we believe in, for who we are. And I feel like I do that every single day with my work, that I'm able to give a voice to the voiceless. And that's a huge component to me of that spirituality piece, and being able to understand why I'm here and what am I going to do about it.
Am I like that you mention not recognizing yourself sometimes? There's so much where we identify as needing to be a certain person, whether it's academically, whether it's, within our relationships, mother, sister, brother, what have you. It's amazing how much and how deep that goes with this identity piece. And not recognizing yourself, because you're like, I don't feel like I'm this person anymore, or something in life has happened so drastically to where I've lost that identity piece, that somebody that I thought I was, but I no longer can live up to or can be. And so you're also talking about self-love. So you're saying that self-love has also a major piece in how we feel emotionally during times of uproar.
Yes. And I think we've heard this term self-love a lot. And what does it mean? And how do it's like self-love and self-care, right? We hear those terms, and it is so true that we really can't love others if we don't know how to love ourselves first. And we can't care for other people if we don't know how to care for ourselves first, because all of it starts at the root, which is us. And in order to grow and to spread those branches, we have to be able to give it to ourselves first. And so that self-love piece is important, but it's really hard. I'm not going to pretend like that's not a hard thing. I deal with people constantly that don't like themselves for various reasons. A lot of times it's because of the things that they're going through in their life, challenges that have been inflicted upon them. And it's so easy as humans for us to turn on ourselves and blame ourselves for things that happen. And that can really impact our self-love. So it is a journey. I don't think that anybody ever wakes up and says, I love myself forever and ever, and that's the end of it. It's a constant walk that we have to remind ourselves that I am worthy regardless of what I'm going through, and I deserve to be here, and I should be here, and I bring value to my friends, my family, my community in whatever aspect that looks like.
Mm. Emma, can you describe what it was like for you when you first experienced and truly felt self-love for yourself?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I've ever been asked that question. I think, I have to think about that a little bit. I think, I think when I launched my book, it was a full circle moment for me where I recognized, yes, I've been through some really significant challenges, but I'm not alone in that people have experienced that as well. And it's changing that thought of this happened to me to this happened for me. And I say that all the time because I really truly don't know who I would be outside of what happened to me, because it shaped and molded me into who I am today, which is a very empathetic, giving, I'll do anything for somebody to help them. And I love that I have that opportunity. So I think that I really started to change that perspective of loving myself through that process of writing my book, because I got to heal and learn about myself and forgive myself and recognize that I can't blame myself for everything that's ever happened, because I can't control things. I can't control other people or the universe, as hard as I try to, control those things. So I would say probably when my book came out, I started to realize, hey, you're here for a reason. And yes, you went through these really awful things, but now you can use it to help other people. And I haven't looked back. Of course, we have our moments. We wake up, we're like, oh my gosh, my hair is not working with me today. Or, it looks like I have a different wrinkle on my face, or whatever it is. But at the core, we love ourselves for who we are and what we bring to the table, because every single one of us does.
It's a very powerful moment. I agree, when you realize this has happened for me, and you find so much joy, and you're grateful for the experiences that you've had in life. Because if you hadn't, then you wouldn't be able to have a bigger impact on others, for others, such as you're doing right now. And it just becomes this beautiful cycle within you, where it's this reciprocation of giving and receiving because of that. When you think of things a little bit differently, this is happening for me, not to me. So that's a beautiful example. Emma, let's share with the audience exactly what it is you're doing and the big impact that you have created and are creating today.
Yes. So through the Life is Worth It organization, we are providing upstream health education to youth and their communities to help prevent suicide. And the way we do that is by educating people to understand that we've got all these dimensions of wellness, and they work together not only to prevent suicide, but to provide lifelong health and wellness. So if you look at the CDC's 8 dimensions of wellness, you'd find that there's various things like physical wellness, intellectual wellness, financial wellness, all of these pieces. We also incorporate a 9th dimension, which is digital wellness. And you'd be surprised that many people actually don't have a very good understanding of all of these dimensions of wellness. So it's very important that we teach people that, because it can not only help save their life, but help them navigate life's challenges. So we do that through various programs and workshops, and we're working on a first of its kind comprehensive high school health curriculum that we are hoping to implement in all high schools in the United States in the next 10 years, which is a really big dream, but it's such a gap in education, and I'm very excited for what's to come in the next year or so.
I can see your excitement. I know that that is such a huge, huge thing, and what a massive impact that brings as well. And you're correct. Emma, I don't know about you, but it's surprising sometimes, where because we've learned things, or because we have knowledge of things, we can sometimes go into that area of, well, everybody else knows this stuff too. That's common knowledge, but yet it is not common knowledge. And you just said, it's surprising that not everybody knows and is really, fluent in the 8 dimensions or what have you, adding on another one that is, technology. And where does our wellness fit into that? And should there be boundaries in each one of these buckets of wellness, right? And how do we implement just a little piece of every single bucket? It can be overwhelming as well, but the sooner and more that we educate ourselves and have the awareness of, the easier it starts to pick up, and we're able to have play with that within our lives. So that said, Emma, that's incredible news. And share with us, what are some of the things that you do on a daily basis to hone in on your overall wellness?
I definitely am getting better at it, I will say, because I am somebody who, I wouldn't say that I'm a workaholic, but I just love what I do so much that it's hard to step away from it. So I'm working on that. I am making sure that I'm getting exercise every single day, that I drink enough water. I mean, our research shows that we should be drinking half of our body weight in water every single day. And that is hard. I will admit that is a hard one for me. So I'm really trying to make sure I drink enough water. Sleep is a huge piece. Every single one of us needs sleep, and most adults in the United States do not get enough sleep, which sets us up for physical or mental health challenges, physical illness. So sleep is really, really important. So I try to get 8 to 9 hours of sleep every single night. And then detaching from work is really important as well. As important as the work is that I love doing, I need to make sure that I'm filling my cup with fun activities with my friends, family members, with my dog. I like to walk my dog twice a day. So those are the things that I do to keep myself healthy. And it's a journey every single day. You have to choose to keep up with those things, because it can be really easy to not. And then I will say that sometimes you have those days too where you just need to lay in bed and eat your favorite snacks and watch movies, and that's okay too.
I think that that's really important too, to have just some grace with yourself, to be easy on yourself and not let everything be so hard. And so I love all the things that you said, especially the play part. I walk my dog twice a day because that's enjoyment. And when we create that community piece of enjoying time with others and letting work go, as enjoyable as it is. And so, Emma, you have been such a great guest on the show. Thank you so much for sharing what you do. Your vulnerability and sharing your story with the world is impressive, and it is making a huge impact. Is there anything else that you want to share with our audience today?
I just want to encourage people that it's okay if you're struggling right now, because we all struggle at some point. So you are not required to know everything or to fix everything alone. So if you are in that space and you're struggling, it's okay to reach out for help. You can go to 988, you can call it, you can text it, or you can chat with it. 988 is the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And so if you're struggling right now today, or you know someone who's struggling, I strongly encourage you to reach out, because they'll be able to provide you support, resources, get you connected to help. It's a really, really important thing that we know who we can reach out to. So 988 is a really great start. Or if you know someone who's struggling, I want to encourage you to reach into them. So often we tell people, oh, if you are struggling or you need something, just let me know. But sometimes it can be really hard to reach out for help. So if you notice that somebody's struggling, reach into them, ask them, hey, what's going on? I've noticed things are different. How can I help you? That can be life-saving and life-changing. So don't be afraid. We all need help at some point.
I love that message, to reach into them. That's really beautifully said. Emma, thank you so much for being a guest on the Wellness Driven Life Show. I want to make sure that everyone knows where to find you. So we've had it displayed on the screen a few times for those of you watching, and for those of you listening in, www.emmawhite.org. Easy peasy. Visit her site. She has an amazing, immense amount of resources that you can find. If her story, which it has, if you've listened this far, has inspired you, please check that out. It is in the description below. Again, Emma, thank you so much for being our incredible guest on the Wellness Driven Life Show. And thank you so much to our audience, because without you, the show wouldn't be possible. So goodbye for now, and we will see you next time.